Hi, I'm the Mythology guy, and I recently read through American-Born Chinese. I'm sure, as many of you know, a Disney Plus show recently came out. I haven't seen it, but I did, hear about it and get interested, and then I was at a Barnes & Noble with Wilda recently, and she pointed this book out to me, and I was like, oh, yeah, I heard there's a show out, so I guess I'll check out the book first before I check out the show. And, I loved it. I loved this book. This was really good, honestly. This was, in some ways it's a simple story, but in other ways it's not so simple. It's really interesting the way it is. It's a graphic novel of 3 different stories happening at once, all of which obviously have a Chinese theme. One of the stories is basically Sun Wukong, the Monkey King. It's his story. It's a simplified version of the Monkey King's story leading up to the Journey to the West. That's right where it stops, is right when Journey to the West begins. But it goes over how Sun Wukong became the Monkey King, how he attained immortality, and how he wanted to be human and not a monkey. And, it goes over that in a fun way, and, I liked it a lot. As someone who's read Journey to the West, I was like, I know what's happening here. The second story is about a kid named Jin, who is a child of 2 Chinese immigrants, and he's growing up in America. And the book goes over his experiences of growing up in America as a child of Chinese immigrants, and I think it does it really, look, obviously I'm white, so I'm not the authority on this stuff, but I thought it was done very well. This is very much a story about race and what it's like to be that race in this country, but not in a preachy way. It never felt preachy, it never felt annoying. That's what turns a lot of people off to stories like this. People are like, oh, it's too preachy, I feel lectured, get woke, go broke, and all that stuff. And, sometimes, people are right about that stuff. Have you seen the Black Christmas remake? It's terrible. But this is... It doesn't feel preachy. It does it in a fun way. It does it in a charming way, in a cute way, and honest to God, a relatable way. I found Jin's story relatable, even though I'm not a child of Chinese immigrants, but, I've been to school, I've been bullied, I'm even into some of the same stuff Jin is into, like Transformers, and, I found him to be a very relatable, likable, interesting character who I really wanted things to go well for him. I wanted him to make friends, I wanted him to get through school, I wanted him to get a girlfriend, I wanted him to be happy, and... I really cared about him, and also, the story made me laugh so many times, at little silly moments, teachers being dumb and mispronouncing his name, and, kids making stupid assumptions about him because of his race, oh, there was one other Asian girl in my class, and by the time everyone realized we weren't related, they started to think we were in an arranged marriage. And it's all it all flows so well, it's not, in your face, it's all just mentioned as if this is the everyday life for him, and it's kind of funny. But also it's oh god, I feel for this kid. Then there's a third story about a boy named Danny who has a Chinese cousin named Qingqi. And Qingqi is every Chinese stereotype under the sun. And basically Danny can't stand his cousin because his cousin embarrasses him all the time. Qingqi's entrance is, and I'm quoting the book here, him entering the room with buck teeth and a Chinese outfit and saying, this is literally how it's written, saying, "Hello, Americans!" That's literally his entrance, and he talks like that the whole story, and he's constantly referencing, how binding women's feet and being good at math class and every other class, and he even has stereotypically disgusting Chinese food, how everyone thinks, oh, they eat this gross stuff. Well, he eats that gross stuff. It's literally every Chinese stereotype under the sun. So here, you might think I'm horrible for saying this, but I could not stop laughing at the Chinky parts. It was too damn funny. I had to keep showing it to Wilda, and we were both just laughing so hard at this character. Oh god, it was too funny. because obviously you're not supposed to take that seriously. That's an acknowledgement of all those stereotypes and how ridiculous they are. And I'm a huge, like, sucker for stereotype humor about any race. I always find it funny. Like, I mean, if it's done well, if you just say a stereotype and don't make a joke out of it, then you're just being mean. But this book, I think, does a good job making a joke out of it and pointing out how ridiculous those stereotypes are. So some of you might be thinking, why 3 different stories? Like, why is it just to cover more kinds of, like, Chinese, like, heritage? Well, it might partially be that, but I'm not going to spoil things, but there actually is a reason that all 3 of these stories are in this book. And the way, there's a bit of a twist, which I didn't really see coming, but when it happened, I was like, that's really interesting. I thought this was just going to be kind of a silly book, but now, like, the narrative's going in a way I never expected it to, and let's see where this goes. And then it does go somewhere, and I was really happy with where it went. I think this book actually is a very good lesson about heritage and about, like, you know, loving yourself and accepting who you are. So yeah, like, I found it very relatable. I really enjoyed it. And I can definitely see why. Apparently it was very successful. Like, I even at the very end, I wanted to read the notes by the author, and the author wrote about how it was heavily based on his own life, and how he just made, like, this comic in his spare time, and, like, stapled it together, and then eventually, like, he actually met some other people who helped him get it actually published, and then it was a huge hit, and people related to it, and loved the book. I can completely see why. It's a very well-written, very enjoyable story. It's, I read it in about 2 hours, so that should give you an idea of how long it takes to read it. But, you know, some of you might be thinking, 2 hours? Well, why even buy it then? I'm very happy to own this. I'm happy to have this on my shelf. I love it. And it's a fun thing to flip through also and just look at, like, the art is very cartoony and cute. You can see some of it right here. And like, it's... I think it's just the perfect art style for the story it's trying to tell. I think it works for all 3 of the stories, and God, I really want to talk about the ending, but I don't want to spoil the book also. I'm very excited to see the show now. I mean, like, I hope it's good. You better have Chinky in the show, Disney. You better have Chinky, or else 1 out of 10. They're not going to have Chinky. There's no way in hell they would risk putting, like, an unintentionally stereotypical offensive character in the show like that. But, I don't know. I'll watch the show, and I'll make a video on the show, and I'll let you know what I think of that. But, you know what? I'm going to talk spoilers for a little bit. So, spoiler warning, I highly recommend the book. Stop here if you haven't read it. So basically what ends up happening is Jin kind of screws up. Like, he's trying to, like, build up this relationship with this girl, and it falls apart, and he doesn't handle it well. He takes it out on his best friend in a really, like, hard to see way. But and some of you, like, reading that might think, oh, he's a total asshole. Why would he do that? Well, I've actually been in scenarios like that where, you know, something really bad happens and you just, like, you say things you don't mean or you do things you regret. It sucks. So I just found him more relatable as a result of that. And I'm sure, like, yeah, he regretted what he did. And one of the things about the book is he just, like, he didn't really love his Asian heritage. He didn't like, you know, how he got teased for it or how difficult it made things for him. So what he ends up wishing is, I guess he ends up wishing that he could be a white person. And then he does become a white person. He becomes Danny from the story. So that Chinky Chinese cousin is his cousin, apparently, it turns out. I'm like, wait, what just happened? Like, suddenly the story became supernatural. And so yeah, he basically lives as a white kid for, I think, about 3 years. And every year, this cousin Chinky is coming and infuriating him. And he just can't stand him at all. And it gets to the point where he, like, gets in a fight with Chinky. And it turns out then, this is how the other story connects, Chinky is actually the Monkey King. And it turns out what was going on was the Monkey King was showing Jin that you can't your heritage is going to follow you. You can't just pretend it doesn't exist. You can't just throw it away and pretend to be something you're not. That's not how life works. Like, he has this huge negative view of his own heritage, so that's why Sun Wukong took on this negative stereotype of his heritage and followed him constantly for years. So in order to show him, like, stop running from your heritage, stop thinking so badly of your heritage. And it even connects to Sun Wukong's story. He's like, look, I didn't want to be a monkey, but I ended up realizing, what was it? It took me 500 years to realize how great it is to be a monkey. And if I had realized that sooner, I could have spared myself a lot of suffering. And so that's when Jin realizes that he should just be himself, and also that he wants to go make up with his friend. And it just ends on him and his friend, you know, talking to each other and laughing together after years apart, and it's sweet, it's charming. It doesn't wrap up every plot thread, but, you know, that's also realistic. In life, you're not going to be able to resolve everything. Sometimes, you know, something is just screwed up and it's not going to be fixed, but the important stuff gets resolved, and the important stuff is his friendship. And I'm very glad that, you know, he got his friend back. I was very invested in this story. Very invested in it. And it makes it all the more interesting because very early in the story, Jin has an encounter with this old woman, and Jin just offhandedly mentions that he wishes he could be a transformer when he grows up. And the old woman tells him, well, maybe you could, if you're willing to give up your soul. And I remember reading that and being like, what a weird, out-of-nowhere thing. But then later, that actually ties in, because he literally transforms into a white person, but he gives up who he is in doing so. That's how that tied in. I think that's really great, like, reincorporation. I really liked it. So yeah, I mean, I think that's about all I have to say about this book. Go get it. It's great. Like, I don't know what the show's going to be like, but I will definitely check it out. I'm very glad I got this book. The author, Luen Yang, he has a real talent, and I really wish there was a sequel to this book. I totally would have read more. But then again, I'm also kind of glad there's not a sequel, because the story tells exactly what it needs to tell and kind of ends at the perfect moment. I just loved it. So maybe I'll check out more of Gene's work. He has written other books. So that's about it. I don't know how to end videos.